Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday Roast. I'm Phil Carroll.
And I'm Kevin Hornsby.
It's Sunday the 10th of December, just over 2 weeks to the festive holiday period. You all ready, Kev? Shopping done, turkey in the oven, etc.?
No, we don't do it here, man.
You don't do it?
My kids have just had their birthday, conveniently. They just got a stack of toys, and now they'll only get 2 toys every week for the next 6 weeks.
Okay.
That's how we do it. Because you don't use the toys otherwise. You get 10 toys all at once. What do you do?
Just keep drip feeding it in over the
So
period.
we keep them, and every few days they get 1 more toy. As long as they've used the other toy and played with it and used it to its potential, then we'll give them another toy. I mean, they're 6 and 8 years old, so you give a 6 or 8 year old everything, then they'll probably play with the box after a while.
Yeah.
Rather than actually the toy. So that's what we do.
Okay. Well, we've got an alternative roast for you this week. It could be a political hot potato, but we like that. We're joined by Paul Johnson, ex-CEO of Power Metal Resources, investor, entrepreneur, where do I stop? And also Charles Archer, financial analyst and commentator investor. Welcome, gents, and Merry Christmas.
Well, Merry Christmas to you too, in fairness. It's difficult to say Merry Christmas, isn't it, when the markets have been so poor? But, bar humbug, maybe, that's the phrase.
Bar humbug. I think you're being very polite saying that they were poor.
Yeah. Are we going to see a Santa rally?
Honest.
Are we going to see a Santa rally that Kev keeps going on about every year? Is it too late for that now? It probably isn't. We've got a couple of weeks, as I alluded to. Do you think we'll see anything?
13 trading days till the end of the year, 31st, I think it is.
A few stocks will do well. I think, it's that time of year for whatever reason. Sometimes they just pop up, and that's the name of the game. And then the problem is when it comes to January, are they going to stay up? And who knows? But I think 2024 is going to be a much, much better year than 2023, personally.
Can't be much worse, can it? I mean, maybe 22 was probably slightly worse than 23. That's the what I've drawn my conclusion on anyway, but we'll see. All right, let's look at some of the news stories that have dominated the press this week. The COVID inquiry continues. We've seen Bojo in the hot seat. Former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson admitted that he should have realised the severity of COVID-19 earlier, acknowledging that earlier action against the virus could have been beneficial. Speaking at the inquiry, Johnson noted his and others' underestimation of the pandemic's scale and pace includes scientists and the Whitehall establishment. Despite this, he maintained that the government did its best under the circumstances. Johnson defended the timing of the first lockdown, attributing delays to incorrect modelling and advice against premature measures. He expressed regret for certain actions, like shaking hands in a hospital, and conceded that mass gatherings should have been stopped sooner. Johnson's testimony also addressed the culture in Downing Street, defending his team against claims of a toxic environment and apologising for not addressing inappropriate language used in WhatsApp messages. What do you make of that? I mean, does anyone want to comment on this? It seems like he's just gone and it's like a sorry, not sorry, or not sorry, sorry situation.
Yeah, well, as you said at the start, it's a political hot potato. I think that he was the wrong man for the job in pretty much every way. And had he not had a pandemic to deal with, he probably could have been quite a good prime minister. But, you're dealt the cards that you're dealt. And I think the way they went around dealing with the pandemic throughout the entire period was just a disaster. I mean, the thing that kind of hit home for me, it was in January, was it 2021? Where they said, right, we're going to open up the schools, we're going to send everyone back to school. And then the next day, they decided to close them down. And then just schools in general, just having bubbles where you have like children of different, obviously you've got siblings which are in different year groups and different bubbles. The entire way they went around preventing the pandemic spread was just madness, and you had to eat out to help out, which is crazy. And I think the problem is you've now what we now have, you've got two things. You've got Boris trying to kind of justify, not only like, the parties and number 10 or whatever else, but just, poor policy. But then on top of that, you've got this pandemic debt and this hangover that you have as a country, or the world in general, but the country has to get over. And how do you get over it? The answer is you have a couple of kind of bad years, and that's what we're going through now.
All your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's a tricky one. First of all, when it comes down to WhatsApp messaging, I think almost anybody who saw their WhatsApp messages taken out of context and published would find themselves in very embarrassing situations multiple times. And that's everyone on this call and everyone who uses WhatsApp. So this concept that you can actually analyse, fairly and critically how someone has dealt with a situation by looking at their WhatsApp, which is a casual, informal, and very quick messaging system, is completely wrong and false. My problem with the COVID situation is that the data that was available to these people was very clear from very early on. And that was the group that was affected were the elderly and the very infirm. And if they'd have taken some decisions very quickly to ring fence that part of the population, or at least offer the opportunity of ring fencing, whether that was stay at home and we will provide everything you need, then there would have been a significant reduction in deaths. The concept of locking down the general population for what ultimately turned out to be quite a mild disease was a shocking way forward for all of the world, in fairness. And that was demonstrated really with the approach that was taken in Sweden, which was far more gently, and ultimately resulted in a much better outcome for that population. I saw with my own children, my own family, the disruption that caused, and it was quite devastatingly bad in some. So I think as a population, as a world, and the governments of the world need to wake up and start acting in a more responsible fashion than they did back in 2020. So it is a political hot potato, Charles, absolutely, definitely. And it's one that from a personal perspective, I'm quite, have strong opinions about.
Do you think it's worth analysing now? I mean, it's like, what's the cost of this? I mean, I know that mistakes were made, and obviously they have come out. And Boris, the first thing he did was made this apology that just felt so like it was just, you know what I mean? It was like almost grovelling, wasn't it? I think there was a few people in the in the galleries or whatever who were literally thrown out protests, weren't they? Because they were very vocal, saying, the dead can't hear you or something along those lines. But at what point does it just become a waste of taxpayers' money? And also, Johnson, we know he's a liar. He's been proven to be a liar in the past, but yet he still continues to get away with it. I just don't understand the mentality of how he can just continue to get away with these lies.
Oh, well, because he's got charisma is the answer to that. But he says that, thousands of WhatsApp messages are deleted, and he doesn't know how. The messages are kept on the WhatsApp server. I've never lost a WhatsApp message. I've never met anyone who's ever lost one. Like, you can't even... And on top of that, when you send a WhatsApp message, other people will have those messages, right? Whatever he sent. I do agree, Paul, by the way, that, your personal private messages that you have one-to-one, I don't think it's fair to, analyse those, individually. But I do think that in terms of this inquiry, I think the issue that you have now is that the inquiry is kind of trying to blame Boris Johnson for all of his mistakes, but everyone already knows he made mistakes. That's why he's not Prime Minister anymore. The point of the inquiry is meant to be, what can we do better next time? Because there will be another pandemic, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. You need to know how to improve your response. And the problem that you have is that it's so politicised that it's not achieving that main goal. So I don't know whether it is worth the taxpayers' money if it's not doing that.
Yeah, I think the best way to deal with a pandemic is not have a public schoolboy who doesn't have a bloody clue how the individual lives in the world, whether it be England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, or anywhere else in the world for that matter, because he's never really lived the life that most people live, and those things that had to be put in place. He didn't understand what he was doing. I genuinely think he's on a different planet. He's not on planet Earth, and he's definitely not on planet England. He comes in and apologises for what? He doesn't really even know what he's apologising for. So I think it's a complete waste of taxpayers' money, to be honest with you.
I think that's what I write it down to. Let's move on to the next story. I mean, this is obviously something that's progressed a lot. Kev and I had first-hand dealings with the fact that we've actually been to Rwanda and seen what the country is like. Obviously, we've seen quite a lot of news this week regarding the treaty being signed with Rwanda, aiming to address the concerns raised by the UK Supreme Court regarding the plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The treaty was signed by British Home Secretary James Cleverly and Rwanda's Foreign Minister Dr. Vincent Biratu. It's part of the UK's strategy to curb illegal migration. It includes provisions ensuring that relocated individuals are not at risk of being returned to a country where their life of freedom would be threatened, a concern known as a refuel resettlement. The UK's decision to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda has faced legal challenges, and the Supreme Court had previously ruled that Rwanda could not be considered a safe third country. So they signed a new treaty, and basically there's been a lot of political unrest. You've seen this week. We've seen one of the ministers resign, the foreign minister, and then we're seeing Rishi Sunak now facing multiple Tory rebellions as MPs on both sides of the party consider voting against his Rwanda plan or abstaining in crucial vote next. What's going on? Do we think that this is a real danger for Rishi now?
My view, it's a huge danger. It's over. His premiership is over.
Yeah.
The problem is that the plan is what he's doing is neither extreme enough for the very right wing of the Conservative Party and too extreme for the moderates. You look at Rwanda, okay, it's not, you say it's a safe country. Obviously, defining safe is complex. It's safer than plenty of African countries, but this is a country where the president has been in power forever, and he got 99% of the vote in the 2017 election. You'll probably get 99% of the vote in the next election. And I think you have the situation, but then the problem is obviously Rishi's made this, central to a conservative life force, right? And so he's decided he's going to pin his flag to the wrong mast, because it's not an easy thing that you can solve. And no matter what you do, you're going to anger a giant proportion of the population. One thing that I would say, though, is that in terms of refugees / illegal migration crossing the channel, and that, it varies person to person who you ask, what you do and how you deal with the problem. Nobody seems to have a long-term solution that the whole country will agree with. So no matter what you do, you're going to make a giant proportion of the population angry. If you look at Australia, for example, which had a similar issue to deal with, it took them many years, but eventually they just did pushbacks, and anyone who managed to cross, they resettled. Well, they say resettled, they sent in a route, didn't they? So I don't know what the solution is, but no matter what it is, it's going to anger a large number of people. What do you think, Paul? I think Rishi's done for. A couple of weeks he might be out, or he might hang on for a month or two, but I think that's it.
Well, it's amazing what can happen in politics. I remember back in the 90s when the expectation was the Conservatives were going to lose the election, and wasn't it Neil Kinnock and his party major conference event that he had that upset the population, and suddenly the Conservatives clung on for a bit longer. You never know what's going to happen. There's a certain passion attaching to this particular issue, and it's come at them at the wrong time, of course, just towards the end of a very long period of Conservative leadership, when they would ordinarily be facing just a general bored population and an expectation of change. But there are three problems to this. It's not just a single issue. One is the routes of leakage in terms of how migrants come into the country and how you stop that flow. And that's extremely difficult, because there are multiple areas where migrants can access the country relatively easily. And then secondly is the management of the migrants. And I think this is the issue that's caused the problem more than anything, when you see hotels blocked out to accommodate people, not to mention free credit cards, given to people so they can go down the shop and buy some fags or whatever they need to get with that cash. And then finally, for those that you accept into the country, there's the deployment of the migrants are accepted and become ultimately citizens of the country, and how those people can be used and to benefit the nation. And at what point are they entitled to full access to all the benefits of being a citizen of the UK? So there's so many different elements to it. It's a tricky one for any government to manage. I suspect poor old Rishi was done for the moment he took office, in fairness. It was a horrible, horrible mandate to take on board after everything that's happened. And I suppose this issue may be the final straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Who thinks Cameron could be the next Prime Minister?
Possible. Anything's possible in politics.
Anything's possible, isn't it, in this mess?
I think it's likely. The interesting thing about all of this, politics aside, is the situation in most Western countries now is total decline of population. You've got the West basically imploding from a population point of view, and we're basically fighting to try and keep people out. Germany let 1.1 million people in, and probably not even the right type of people, because I believe that they knew this was not humanitarian. They knew their country needed young, vibrant workers who were going to have more babies. And the West is desperate for this. It has to have it. Japan is probably one of the worst places in the world for this as well.
South Korea. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
we are going to implode over the next 20, 30, 40 years because our birth rate's not high enough. Our death rate is very low because everybody's living longer. And we need more people. And yet we have governments in place, whether it be Conservative or Labour, who are basically saying, no, we're going to keep people out. We're going to keep people out. Like by the whole EU situation, we have just basically exported a huge number of low-paid wage jobs, and now there's nobody to do them. So you find it in restaurants, you find it in hotels, you find it in shops. There isn't anybody to work in them. So what are we going to do?
Problem is, one of the key reasons why Westerners aren't having children now is that they can't afford to. This is the reality, and obviously that ties into economic problems, but it's very difficult for someone on median household income is about 35 grand a year. A median household, even a starter household.
Okay, Charles, but this is where I'm going to argue with you, right? Okay.
Yeah, hit me.
You're going to turn around and say to me that when my parents were having 4 kids in Liverpool in the 1950s and 60s, when we were not earning very much money, they had enough money to have the kids? No. The decision is not they don't have enough money to have kids. The decision is they're deciding to not have kids because they want a better quality of life for themselves. That's what's happened. Not that they don't have enough money.
I mean, maybe that may be the case, but I do think that people would have children, or people would have more children if it was easier economically for the average person. I think that plenty of people have just kind of given up on all of the milestones that they should have in life, like buying a house or getting married or having kids, because if you work 40 hours a week and then you pay your rent and your bills and whatever else, you're left with not very much. And I think, getting together a house deposit in 2023 at the prices you have now, the interest rates that you have now, is just not feasible for the average family. Having said that, yes, the luxuries that you have now in the 2020s compared to, say, the 1950s or the 1960s are much, obviously you have a lot more and your expectations are much higher. But I do think that if you look at the house prices, I think Duncan, the Monitor Traders, I mean, he did an analysis on this. The housing is more expensive now than it's been since the Victorian times.
The problem is wages haven't gone up in correspondence with the house prices.
Exactly.
That's the problem. 30 grand is your average wage. 20 grand was your average wage 15 years ago, when house prices were probably, I don't know, a third of what they are now, or even half the price. So there's just a massive disparity in the price of a 4-bedroom family house or 3-bedroom family house and they're actually earning. So, what is it? 6, 7x, 8x in some parts of the country.
9, 10.
9x,
I mean,
exactly.
It is what it is. I don't think it's, that I think personally, obviously a lot of that is because we've had interest rates so low since 2009.
100%. If you had fixed interest rates at 4 or 5%, which we're going to have probably, they're saying now there's a alert.
The prices are correcting.
4%. They're correcting, but even if 3.5, 4 becomes the new norm, people are still not going to be able to afford and borrow the same amount of money to be able to get into the houses they want to get into.
And hopefully prices will come down. People will have more children. But I do agree. I think it's a kind of thing of the words. This is such a societal change. I would agree with Kev that even if the prices come down, even if the cost of living becomes a lot easier, you will have more Westerners having more children. But it's still a cultural change. I think, as a general rule, people, I have 3 kids, right? I have 3 sons, and that's out of the norm now. That's 1 more than most people have. Two more than a lot of people have. I don't know anybody in my circle has more than 3 children. Do you guys at all? No, I can't think of anyone other than my personal family.
It's also a faith-based situation as well, because anyone of Islamic faith is likely to have many more children. That's proven in the consensus and everywhere in the world, basically. You could argue that the good old Catholic families were exactly the same. You went down Scotty Road in Liverpool from the Catholics, and there was 10 kids, 11 kids, 12 kids, 9
I'm
kids,
one of 12.
8 kids. You're one of 12.
Indeed, Catholic family. There you go.
Yeah.
There's no faith. Faith has died out in terms of Christianity in the West, and so you just have fewer children. That's just part and parcel of the way society has moved. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I have 6 kids.
Paul, well done. Congratulations.
You have 6. Very good.
And I have to say, I come from an evangelical Christian family background, which had nothing to do with it. But in fairness, I've been a small cap investor for 30 years. So that probably had something to do with it, because I had no money to do anything else.
And now you need them to come good so you can pay for them.
Oh, it's not a problem now. I just sell them one by one as and when.
Boys for
Sell
sale
the
going
kids or the
cheap.
stocks, which one?
Oh, sell the kids, he means.
How do you think I converted some options in Power recently? You know, it's just one of you has got to go, and it's the sacrifice I'm willing to make.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, obviously, you're a major shareholder in Power. I've done a research report into Power Metal earlier this year. The share price where it is now is crazy low. I mean, that is an opportunity and a half, obviously not investing advice, but in my opinion, give it a year, late 2024, it's going to at least double, at least from where we are now, and probably more. What do you reckon? You think it's going to be a good year for Power in 2024? Or do you think, what do you reckon?
I'm biased because
I know you are.
Because I ran it for four or so years. I think I'm the second largest investor after Mr. Rule decided to go and beat me. And it's a beautiful company. It's diverse across 3 continents. It's operating in all the jurisdictions that matter. It's operating in all the commodities that matter. It's got everything from very early stage exploration interest through to mineral resource estimate, large deposit projects, and it's just as with many companies in down markets, all the businesses suffer share price wise. The valuation goes to stupid levels, and it will at some point, either through individual news items or through general market uptick, will find its way to a much higher level, in my view, and it will probably go overvalued again, by some considerable margin. So I don't know what the ceiling is. I would have thought it was many times higher than just a single 100% uplift, but I really don't know. Obviously, it would be nice to see it trading at a fair valuation. I think the research report that was done suggested 3.3 pence, around that level.
A research report, 3.2, I think it was, but definitely. Yeah.
My 2 penneth on Power Metal Resources is when you add GMET, when you add the potential there, and the fact that in my view is very undervalued. You add the fact that they are spinning out now the uranium assets, and that should happen in the next 2 or 3 months, as they've announced. Those 2 things alone are going to be, the holdings in those 2 things are going to be worth at least what the market cap is worth today, and possibly a bit more. So basically, my view is that everything else that Power Metal Resources owns is a free hit from here.
I mean, if you look at Golden Metal Resources, the tungsten deposit, I mean, it's the largest tungsten deposit undeveloped in the US. It's looking for grant funding. I think it's almost guaranteed it will get it. You look at First Class Metals, where Power owns about a quarter of the company. They're starting to drill the Zigzag deposit, and that's really, really promising. Uranium IPO is going on. They've got plans in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, I mean, the multi-commodity nature of the company, I don't offer many research reports, but this particular company jumped out at me because the valuation disconnect is just crazy. And when the bull market comes back, you're gonna be laughing, But again, not investment advice, and we have to wait for the markets to turn. I think that's the reality. I personally think we've already hit the bottom now, but who knows what 2024 will bring.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of. We've talked about how many are undervalued right now in this sector. It's unbelievable. We are just looking at some of the best performers of the week. Panther Metals, which obviously is one we spoke to Darren Hazelwood last week at the mining convention. That's had a really good run. It's like 54% up. It's one of the best movers on the market this week. And we spoke to some really interesting. We met First Class Metals. We met Oliver from Golden Metal as well. He was on last week as well. So it's really encouraging to see Canada and that whole sort of Thunder Bay and Ontario. We actually met the mining minister, George Pirie, as well, and had a good chat with him. And it just looks like a really nice jurisdiction to do business.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like the Manatee Lakes project at Panther Metals, they just reported back 5 holes. And successful, good, wonderful. And I think the thing is at the end of the day, all of the companies are so undervalued, so it only takes one little catalyst to see a significant uplift. And the other thing with a lot of junior resource companies, and Paul's a good example, but a lot of the shares are held by either institutions or by high net worth investors. So the effective free float is much smaller. So you only need a few buys to see a share price go really, really high. Conversely, you only need a few sells, which is, obviously the problem in today's market. But it does mean that as we recover, you're going to see those, a lot more companies where the share price has gone up 50% in a week, seemingly on very little news because the liquidity is so low.
Very good. Let's talk about critical metals. So we're talking, and I say that because of the GMET thing as well, obviously, in the tungsten. But what do we perceive is going to be seen as not just a critical metal, but a critical asset to have over the next, say, 3 to 5 years? What in this world is going to be seen as extremely precious? What do you think, Paul?
Well, I listened to Oliver Friesen, CEO of Golden Metal, the other day on an interview talking about, answering a similar question. And he said, well, kind of everything. The world is so desperate for all sorts of different metals. It's not easy to pick one or two. And that's a fair comment. I think we're going to see pretty much generically across the entire metal space a big revaluation. From a company perspective, I think what's massively undervalued at the moment is the strategic land holdings of businesses. And there's often an expectation. And I heard this as CEO all the time on properties, people saying, well, it will be difficult to mine. Well, junior resource exploration companies are not in the mining business. They're in the research and development business, really, looking at pieces of land and seeing, what the potential holds. And then if they find something of interest, there's bigger players that can come in to move projects forward and go into mining. And so essentially your junior is involved in the land business. And it's a bit like the old McDonald's story, if you've watched, the film, where they started to make money big time when they realized they weren't into selling burgers, they were into holding strategic land. Yeah. So I would always think that that's the primary concern of a junior company, to have the best properties when the market turns around. In terms of the metals themselves, there are so many you could pick. It's often the one that comes out of left field that surprises you. And the metal, for me, it's linked again to Golden Metal Resources, is tungsten. Yeah. Where we're seeing quite a dramatic shift away from Eastern supplies of tungsten metal, a shortage of available tungsten in the West, and gradually, bit by bit, particularly in the United States, you're seeing quite a significant increasing focus on sources of homeland metals, and tungsten will form part of that. So for me, it's all about the land. And then secondly, it's about trying to pick which metal will outperform. But for me, tungsten's the high flyer. That's,
echoes my thoughts. I mean, tungsten is definitely one of the top ones. I think anyone in the copper space is, and we're talking, the majors, the miners, everybody will tell you there's a giant copper supply gap coming up. So if you're looking over the next sort of decade, that metal's going to do well. Uranium is obviously flying high. Related to tungsten, titanium, I think, might do really well. If you look at the US, they get 92% of their titanium from Japan. Japan can't increase the amount of titanium it makes, and the US needs are increasing at the moment. So that's another one I think could do really well. But again, in the critical mineral space, was it Rio Tinto saying we need 1,000% more lithium mined in the next few years? That news came out, the other day. So you want lithium, copper, nickel, graphite as well. Again, graphite prices are slumping, but you've had the graphite export ban from China, so you need ex-China sources to come online. So whether that's sovereign metals in Malawi, or for example, Blanco Resources, there's 1,000 different metals that could go really, really well. So you want to have a diversified portfolio.
You've got ExxonMobil as well, who've just announced that they're going into lithium as well. So when it's in demand, when your big oil majors are saying it's the new oil, lithium's a new oil.
Yeah, lithium, I've covered lithium for years and years. The supply gap is obvious there, and I know prices have been falling. But what makes me laugh is you have the larger banks will say, there's going to be a glut of lithium, and yet they're all buying shares, in the larger lithium producers. At Pilbara Minerals, one of the major banks, bought tons of shares. And the way it's justified is that you have the commodity trading section of a major bank will decide where the commodity is going, but the equity trading part of a major bank will make opposite decisions. And so, you can't really, I look at what the equity trading side is doing rather than, because the key thing to understand is that when a major bank is making, generally when they're making judgment calls about where a metal will go, they're talking about in the next 12 months. when they're making equity calls and talking about the next 5 years. So I personally, I look at all the critical minerals and I just think, wherever there's a decent opportunity, just buy some shares and have a diversified portfolio. Because as Paul says, you don't know which one is going to do the best.
Yeah, sovereign metals, I think, is a very interesting one with all of that titanium, because titanium is going to be required. But I've got another question. Do you think the electrification of the world is going to go as quickly as we all thought it was going to go 2 or 3 years ago?
No.
What do you think, Paul?
Well, the electrification of the world, largely speaking, has been laid out by governments and government policies. And as we know from since mankind first formed governments, they're generally completely incorrect, poorly constructed, and very rarely actually deliver on schedule. So I think we can expect that this policy and the environmental policies of the world and connected policies will always take a lot longer than they anticipate. Also, at some point down the road, they might work out that they don't need them in the first place unless it generates additional tax revenues that they do benefit from. So there's a possible change of plans down the road. But it seems clear that things like moving over to electric cars is not going to happen in time. It seems clear that general electrification, move to different forms of energy, is simply not going to happen in time. And we know from the metals business itself that there simply isn't the underlying metal availability. There's been an underinvestment in supply, and the demand expectations going forward are vastly in excess of what's currently available or could be available in the foreseeable future. So I think all of these policies will either fail or will take dramatically longer than anticipated. From my perspective as a junior resource investor, then I'm delighted by this, of course, because that means that at some point when the market wakes up to itself, we'll see dramatic rises in pricing of the commodities and the underlying shares pretty much across the board.
Yeah, obviously the timelines are incredibly ambitious. I mean, you're talking net zero by 2050. All new cars in the US are meant to be EVs by 2035, I think. There's similar policies in the UK, Europe, and Australia. And I think the electricity grids won't handle it. The infrastructure doesn't handle it. When in this country, for example, there's a pothole outside of my house that hasn't been fixed in 6 months. If you can't fix the pothole, how are you going to get the electricity grid?
And how many cars is that pothole broken?
Oh, well, exactly. And the electric cars are twice as heavy. So, yeah, I mean, in infrastructure terms, especially with interest rates so high, there will be delays. But having said that, I mean, I remember when I was looking into EVs in 2016, 2017, when they weren't kind of mainstream or popular. And the argument I was making then was that, the Ford Model T came along and replaced horses, almost completely within about 15 or 20 years. So, the internet, I was born before the internet was invented, and you guys were born a long time before. Technological advancement and change happens a lot quicker than what you think. The Wright brothers and the moon landing, there was only, 70, 80 years between the two. So we have, we sit here and go, there's nowhere near enough metal. There's no way that it's going to be done. And yet you can't discount technological advances or the fact, for example, that oil may just simply run out. This is the other thing. I mean, it's almost, I feel like, no matter how old you are, you've always been told oil is going to run out in 50 years, right? But at some point, the economically viable deposits are going to run out. You're going to have to rely on renewables, and that's going to change the world in many ways. And a big part of that is going to be electrification. So you're going to have those push and pull factors. Is it going to happen by 2050? Probably not. But if there's less and less oil and oil prices keep rising and rising, then you're going to have deposits which aren't economically viable now may become viable. Do
you not think a lot of it is almost dictated as well by China? If you look at the COP, was it the COP28 that was just on last week in Dubai, and everybody's trying to push for this, this drive to go carbon neutral, zero emissions, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, I mean, the attitude that I feel comes across is if China and America don't adopt it, then England and Europe are not going to make any little slightest bit of difference if we all go carbon neutral by 2035. So surely the mindset is convincing the likes of China, who are one of the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide in the world, and America probably second. If they don't change their attitude to it, then what's the point in us bothering? Because we're not going to make any difference.
I mean, China's added 10 nuclear reactors this year. It's trying to move away from coal, even though it uses masses and masses of it. But the problem is we export our emissions to China. You know, a lot of the manufacturing that we used to do, a lot of the most carbon intensive stuff we used to do is now done in the Far East. So, you know, we talk about how, okay, so if the UK, if the UK, goes to net zero at huge economic cost, it won't change anything in the world. That's probably true, but, it has to start somewhere. And I think China is, trying to change its methods, not least from a public health perspective. There are cities in China that you can't walk through because of the smog. So I don't know. I think it's one of those things that's going to be extremely expensive to do, but at some point it will just happen, and the legislation is there. And then the only question is, we're about to go into a downturn. You're going to have governments worldwide that are going to choose how they're going to spend their money. It's going to be difficult to commit to the timetables that we have at the moment and keep the population on side. What do you reckon, Kev?
I've got a bit of a curveball here, because I don't think electric vehicles are going to be the main way that we get about in 20 years' time. I think they'll be part of the plan, but I don't actually now think that the general populace is going to spend 60, 70, 80,000 pounds, dollars, whatever you want to call it, to get themselves on the road with electric cars. And one of the reasons is actually the insurance companies. The insurance companies have now come out and said that if there's a problem with the battery on one of these vehicles, they're basically going to write it off. So if there is a problem with the batteries and the batteries are damaged, then you've got a 60, 70, 80,000 dollar, pound, whatever currency you want to use, piece of equipment, which is now basically worth about 10 or 15,000 dollars, basically, if it's recycled.
That's why insurance premiums have gone up so much.
Exactly. How much is it going to cost to insure those vehicles? So that's one point. The second point, in terms of a out of left field element that I think is going to be massively in demand, is if we continue down this line of producing all this electricity on the basis of renewables, we need shed loads of vanadium. We need to produce huge, big batteries. Vanadium seems to be the way forward in terms of those. So I'm looking at companies like Kendrick Resources, which have vanadium prospects in Scandinavia. You're looking at Bushveld Minerals, I think, who also has vanadium. I think there's one other, but it doesn't come to mind. I don't know whether you can think about it, Charles. Who else has vanadium?
Western Australia, potentially. ASX,
which company?
Vanadium WA. It's a ASX stock. They've got a nice little deposit.
So my view is this could potentially be literally like gold, because the vanadium keeps the electricity. It doesn't lose any of its charge, and every time you charge it, it charges to the same capacity. Now, does that not sound great? Does that not sound better than a lithium-ion battery? Now, obviously, the scenario is that these things have to be huge, have to be very, very big in size. But my view is that is something that the world is going to have to take on, because we're going to have to store this electricity in some way, shape, or form. Maybe that's not for today. Maybe it's, it literally is 5-10 years down the line. But I really do think there's some good potential there in terms of what we're thinking about. And the other thing with lithium is whether it catches on or not, and I think it will, is, and I'm quoting the company Tech Minerals, which in the UK has gone down the line of the recycling of the lithium batteries, as in the black mass. Because if there isn't enough lithium, then what have we got to do? We've got to recycle the stuff we've got. Lithium doesn't go bad. You've basically just got to recycle it and stick it in another battery. So for me also, I think there's a whole industry to be born there, and it's being born now. It's in its birthing stage, which is to recycle these lithium-ion batteries, to get the lithium out of it, to get the graphite out of it, to get all the things that are in it. Because if we really are in this society that says there's a problem with that battery, we're not taking the risk of it exploding and killing somebody, so we've got to recycle it, then these recyclists are going to be a big deal.
What about hydrogen? Because hydrogen is one that is the hydrogen fuel cell for me is an answer. And I know Toyota have been developing it for many, many years, but I think they sold fewer than 4,000 hydrogen fuel cell vehicles last year. So very disappointing on numbers. But if they can get that right and they can get the price point down, just like EVs are massively expensive, if you can adapt it and get it down, scale it out, then I think hydrogen fuel cell is I'm not saying it's the be be all and end all, and it's the answer, as you said. Like, I think electric vehicles have got a purpose. Hydrogen fuel cells have got a purpose. Other methods as well, with oxygen cells in there as well. There's many different ways around this, isn't there, to improve emissions.
Well, I think, Kev's first point about the expense of the cars, Tesla's literally this month is planning on, said it's going to launch a $25,000 EV, right? So that's your initial entry car right there. Hydrogen fuel, I think the hydrogen, it's just to create the fuel itself is so energy intensive. If you can make green hydrogen fuel, which is essentially using a windmill to split the atoms to make the hydrogen, then that's an answer, but that requires massive capital expenditure. The good news is you can use existing petrol stations to put the hydrogen in the ground. So the infrastructure is already there in some ways, which is nice. I do think that in terms of vanadium, which we just touched on, is it Toyota, which is, Subaru. So they're developing lithium vanadium batteries. And their argument is that if you combine the two elements, that you can get a lithium battery, which is superior in pretty much every way. And the extra weight is worth it. So, is that you've got sodium-ion batteries as well. I think the thing is there's not enough lithium. People are aware of that. No matter what you do, there just aren't enough projects for the anticipated demand if every car in the world is going to have a lithium battery. So different elements need to be looked at. Lithium's the gold standard. Now, you were talking about recycling. One company that I haven't covered it in any depth, but it's on my radar is Alchemy Capital. So they are planning a battery recycling facility in Teesside. Obviously, it's a free port. There's lots of tax advantages. That's something which could be really interesting in the near future. Because again, yes, this recycling is going to be needed. And the shares are, I think, they're cheap as chips at the moment. So
yeah, they just need to get the funding away on that one. We've looked at it with Paul Atherley runs it. He's a chairman, isn't he? And it does look very promising. It needs something like 200 million investment from what I can see in terms of capex.
I think the problem is it is British Volt is the problem in my view, to be honest. I mean, the government is very wary of lending out money and not getting anything back for it. And this is not Alchemy's fault at all. It's just where it is in the political cycle. You might find that when a new government comes in, which will likely be next year, that suddenly the investing environment becomes a lot more attractive and it's a lot easier to get hold of money. So yeah, I mean, Alchemy, it's down 4% today. It's down 60% year to date. It's only a £9 million market cap. The potential is really, really strong in my view. And yeah, I mean, that would be the recycling opportunity to go for.
Yeah, so I would say to you, yes, Alchemy is good, but the company in the UK that's actually recycling the batteries as we speak is Technology Minerals through Recyclist, and I really think that's a fantastic opportunity. It's about to be very, very revenue generative over the next 12 months. I think there's going to be potential for the whole program to escalate pretty fast up to the predicted 5 lithium ion battery recycling plants in the UK, and they have the opportunity to expand into Europe as well. So I think this could be worth hundreds of millions in 2-3 years time. But it's so lowly valued at the minute, and also has mining assets, lithium, etc. I think copper, cobalt play in America. So yeah, I think that has a lot of positives. I agree with you with Alchemy Capital, but the problem is the word capital.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
The reason it's fallen. Yeah,
it doesn't have it, and it's not likely to have it. I think anytime soon. Pensana has had the same situation, hasn't it?
Yeah,
Pensana, the same CEO or the same chairman, and it's suffered from the same thing. It hasn't managed to get it over the line. Hasn't managed to get
Horizonte have had the same problem as well. It's all about the funding these days, isn't it?
I think Horizonte is a bit different, to be honest. But
yeah.
I think these recycling opportunities. I mean, if you look at Beck Mineral, the market cap 15 million ish.
Yeah,
just
15,
at the moment,
16 million.
It's in the pennies for the possibilities. So yeah, again, 2 companies right there, which. You're looking. It's funding. How do you get the capex? How do you get the agreements? It's the issue in this market.
Yeah, well, with TechMin, basically, the EBITDA next year should be around 20 to 30 million pounds, as in what they will have as free cash flow once the batteries start to be.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from the gate fees, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, the gate fees, because the people are paying now to get rid of these lithium batteries because they've been stored up for years all over the UK in fields and in different places, and there's going to be fires galore. Just wait until we see how many fires occur in landfills over the next period of time, and it becomes a real problem. It becomes a real problem that we're having explosions, and kids play on the landfill next minute. And it's not going to be good. I promise you. I think it's coming, and then there'll be much more attraction to those things. So, guys, let's look at stock-specific things then. Charles, Paul, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you had to pick 3 stocks for the next 3 years, so not even just the next 12 months, you're looking a bit further ahead, the next 3 years, what 3 stocks would you pick? Paul, you give me your first one, and then we'll go to Charles, and then Paul, and then Charles, and then Paul, and then Charles. What are you thinking, Paul? And you're allowed to sell your own book.
So is this in order of priority?
Not necessarily. They can be in any order. They can be in any order, because I'm springing the question on you anyway, so go for it.
No, so it's okay. I never really have a wide focus on stocks. I generally focus on... Okay, so I would say, not in order of priority, I would probably go Conroy Gold would be my suggestion at one out of the 3, which is operating in Ireland, Northern Ireland, with a gold project with circa 65 kilometers of gold mineralization that they have with a joint venture partner, Demir, Turkish company, part of the large Koç group, have been able to accelerate expenditure on the ground and really demonstrate that gold mineralization across 65 kilometers, together with narrowing down a lot more on 2 main areas, Clontibret and Clay Lake. They have a 517,000 ounce JORC compliant resource. It's there. I think they published a conceptual study quite a few years ago, as the company has been on the market forever, that suggested 15 to 20 million ounces of potential gold in their project areas. It's all well and good, but until recently, they haven't really had the capital to invest in active exploration, but they now have. The results that they're releasing are interesting, building on the story. Market cap wise at the moment, they are, what's the share price market cap now?
15p.
I mean, 15p.
Market cap's about 8 million, 7.5, 8 million, I think.
Yeah, there you go. So powerful joint venture partner, powerful project, active exploration news starting to flow, bottom of the market stuff. Except, of course, for gold itself, their prime commodity, it's not the bottom of the market. The gold price is strong. It looks all set for a decent run. Problem, of course, is that out of left field in these shares, anything can happen. It's a single project focus, mainly single joint venture partner focus, and you never going to happen. But if all things go reasonably according to plan, one could easily see that share trading over the next 3 years at dramatically higher levels.
Agreed. Charles, what's your first pick?
More expensive company, but Avacta, which is a biotech. They've developed a clinical drug called AVA6000, which is a prodrug of doxorubicin. And the generic idea is that you'll be able to deliver significantly more chemotherapy to the tumor over many more cycles, without any side effects to the chemotherapy whatsoever, and being extremely much more effective. Now, I've done a lot of research into this particular company. They are early stage. We're going to get some phase 1A results of this drug. They're going to come out later this month. But this particular company with this particular asset, I've covered oncology stocks for years, just like I have Junior Resource. And the asset, it seems to be, just works. So for perspective, when you look at a phase 1 clinical trial, the general idea is just to check that the drug is safe to work with. And yet you're having patients on the trial where the disease has not progressed or is even regressing already. I look at this company, I think this is one of the companies that is going to get bought out by one of the larger biotech firms in the very immediate future, whether it's a few months or a couple of years from now. So if you're looking at kind of a 3-year timeline, that's got to be my number one choice at the moment. But then having said that, this is a company with a several £100 million market cap versus Conroy Gold, where the growth potential is much higher, I would say, in terms of maybe not higher, is that they're just completely different opportunities because they're operating in different spaces in the market.
All right, that's Paul's choice. Don't say anything about that. Right, Paul, number 2.
Well, I used to invest in biotech companies and fintech companies, but I'm just a resources bitch at the moment, I'm afraid. My number 2 has to be Golden Metal Resources, GMET. We talked briefly about it before.
Ooh, you're gonna have to go and do
beat me to it.
more thinking, Charles, on this one.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But the reason for that is I like the concept of a business that has fundamental value, which is the tungsten, copper, silver, zinc deposit, Pilot Mountain. Visited first time in late 2016 in Nevada, USA. I was stunned. It really is a mountain of metals. Previously worked so many different holes in the side of the mountain, and simply scalable, because recent work has proven that the resource is much larger than they thought. So is it 2, 3, 4, 5 times larger? I don't know. In situ value at the moment is circa $1.5 billion. That's an awful lot. Together with that fundamental value, you have the blue sky. The G resource exploration investors' main driver. Projects are all in Nevada. They have the Garfield project, where they've recently released some news demonstrating that it looks like they have potentially a large copper deposit there. And Garfield's great because it was always my favorite as a 16-year-old. Give gifts to girlfriends. I give a Garfield cat soft toy, so that for me is the right name as well. And then finally, Golconda project, which is a gold focused exploration targets in an area that's peppered with large gold deposits and gold mines. So it's got the right blend of fundamental and blue sky value. Its market cap at the moment is about £6 or so million. So it's right at the bottom of the cycle valuation wise, and I think it will outperform.
Right, well, that's fine. I'll do my numbers 2 and number 2. So I think number 2 has got to be Ondo Incitec for me at the moment in terms of a growth opportunity. They've got the leak bot, which is proven, it's patented, and it's something that companies have been trying to solve for decades, and it reduces water damage claims for insurers by about 70%. Now, Ondo's partners with plenty of clients, but one of the recent ones that caught my eye was Nationwide, which is the 8th largest homeowner insurer in the US. And they're planning to launch in one US state in early 2024 and then spread out through the country through 2024, 2025. Now, this particular device, the LeakBot, is a one-of-a-kind design. It's something that people have been trying to solve for years and years and years. And in terms of growth potential, you could have one installed in pretty much every home where there's plumbing in the entire world. And I think I look at this opportunity, and I think for the market cap that you have, it is a company that's going to get bought out by an insurer at some point in the not too distant future. And yeah, I mean, that's my second growth opportunity.
Okay, Paul, number 3.
Yeah, well, it was obvious, really. Power Metal Resources. I didn't dare.
Yeah, you did it again. Of course, you can't help yourself, can you, Paul?
I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine.
I didn't give up 4 years of my life and working 120 hours a week.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you probably deserve that one rather than me, so that's fair enough. We'll live with that.
You were going to pick it again?
Well, Golden Metal and Power Metal are both on my shortlists, but, Paul beat me to it, so that's fine. But it's okay. Yeah, Paul, you hit it. You go for Power Metal. I think we've talked it enough. Yeah.
We've kind of talked about it enough in that sense.
But Paul, I'll ask you a question about Power Metal Resources, okay? Because you're sort of the inside track on this. If we took out GMET and we're going to take out the uranium assets, because that's already been predicted, or not predicted, it's in the market that's going to happen. What is left in Power Metal Resources that gets you very excited?
Yeah, I was always a believer that you never took a project on unless you were very excited about it. So almost everything that company holds filled me with excitement at the time it was acquired or developed, and it fills me with excitement today. Almost anything from the portfolio can deliver. They're just on the cusp, one would expect, of drilling again at Malopo, which is the large nickel PGE's target. And the market generally is impatient at the moment. They want you to drill, or they don't want you to drill, or they're worried about what might happen, the cost and all the rest of it. But ultimately, that's the type of revolution that can 100-bag a company if you get the right kind of discovery. So I've always been a lover of Malopo. Tati Goldfields that's an 8-kilometre long gold mineralized system, formerly worked with mine workings at Cherished Hope, is also super exciting for me. I think major gold deposit. You have in First Development Resources, Power Metal owns 58%. The Walal project, which is a Javier on Lucky Likey, where they're looking for deep gold copper targets. It's another deep drill, but it's one that if it hits, as we saw with Greatland Gold, a company that can go up, a company maker and can drive the price of the owning company up dramatically in the markets. First Development Resources that holds it is looking to list in London as soon as possible. I'd like to go back to a point related to gold and metal within the portfolio of power, though, and that's that if you take the broker report target price for gold and metal, which was 35 pence, which is eminently doable by that business, if gold and metal hits 35 pence, Power Metals holding will be circa £18 million just on the shares it holds at the moment. And on that basis, it will be circa 50% greater than the market cap today. So I think that demonstrates that just one part of the business can make Power valuations fundamentally undervalued. It's not going to take an awful lot to send the general market cap of Power a lot higher. Over 3 years, I believe that we're going to see £1 billion valuations on some of these quality resource juniors as the cycle kicks in full on. And I fully expect that Power will be them.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. Charles, give us your number 3. And Phil, get ready. What's your 1, 2, 3?
Okay, I want to say just on Power Metal, because I also want to add one more project, Orphea North, which is adjacent to Sayona's Orphea project, lithium project. That's also one that I know Paul didn't mention it. There's 1,000 assets in that portfolio, but that's one that I think is really exciting. In terms of my number 3, it's one of two. It's either going to be Greatland Gold, but then I think they've seen so much growth, and even recently the share price kind of doubled over the past few weeks. One that I'm really excited about is Sovereign Metals. This has got a roughly £125 million market cap. It's got the Cassia graphite titanium deposit. And the key thing to understand about this deposit is that the titanium is rutile rather than ilmenite. So it's incredibly valuable. Now, Rio Tinto owns 15% of Sovereign Metals, which is literally just released its pre-feasibility study. It's in an optimization stage at the moment. The assets in Malawi, and yes, this isn't a country with like masses of mining pedigree, but it's like Zambia. It really wants to get cracking. But yeah, Rio Tinto invested for just over 40 million Australian dollars for 15% of Sovereign Metals shares back in July. And the general idea is that once that definitive feasibility study comes out, Rio is going to buy the company at a massive premium to what it is now. So if you look at the trying to think of the words, if you look, there's a $597 million capex cost according to the pre-feasibility study, but the modeled 25 years life of mine revenue is $16 billion. And that's a conservative 25 years they modeled it on. It's probably going to be longer by the time the DFS comes out. So when I look at this deposit, it's not just got titanium. It's also, not only is it the largest rutile deposit in the world, it's also the second largest graphite deposit in the world. And the graphite that you have there is also extremely high quality. So this is an asset and a company that's it's not given enough attention. I think that, especially when Rio Tinto came on board, again, this was only in July. Very few people took notice. The share price didn't take notice at all. And there will come a point when it gets enough publicity that the share will re-rate pretty sharply. So yeah, that's number 3.
And the Malawi president really likes it as well.
Oh, he loves it. I've got a quote for you from the Malawi president, if you like. Lazarus Chakwera is on record. Yeah, he said in front of the US General Assembly that the recent discovery in Malawi of the largest deposit of rutile in the world means that Malawi's economic rise is imminent. So he's pointing to it as a flagship for the mining industry, which is one of the 3 pillars of
and
their
the main
economic
and the main
strategy.
CEO of Rio Tinto this week came out on stage and talked about it, didn't he? As one of the main drivers of Rio Tinto's share price. What does that tell you that Rio's going to do?
They're going to buy. Well, I think if you Argonauts, so they did their best undeveloped projects report, right? And there's quite a few projects in there, but the Cassia is in the report. And they said, Rio Tinto's end game is to become 100% owner of Cassia. Like, they've come out and said it. But the interesting thing is that when I read that report, I knew almost every deposit by name and every company. I did not know Sovereign Metals. I didn't know Cassia. So this is relatively new to me. but the opportunity has just jumped off the page. So it's something that I look at.
And Rio got in around the sort of 25, 26 pence mark. It was equivalent in odd cents, but actually,
and I was like 22, 23 now.
So you can get in below Rio's investment, and they've got the option to take from 15 to like 19.99%, just under 20, which will be a slightly higher premium. But if you look at the figures on it, the MPV and the IRR, they're phenomenal.
It's crazy. Like literally, I've done a fair bit of research into it this week, but if you look at hang on, I'm going to find the numbers because they're just,
it's like 1.6 billion NPV, IRR around
28%. Yeah. Or 450 million.
They're tattooed on the back of my eyelids, those ones.
Oh, they probably are. I mean, the only thing that I see, and also the other thing is the operational cost, $404 a ton OPEX is also industry leading lows. So you've got the largest deposits of graphite and rutile and the lowest possible costs.
Yeah, look at the annual EBITDA of around $400 million, and the market cap is sat around the sort of, we were saying
122 million market cap, $400 million EBITDA. Most majors are valued between 4 and 5 times EBITDA. So that would, if it was on their books, if it was on Rio's books, this would be valued about 2 billion, I reckon.
Yeah,
somewhere in that region. So they're going to pay some money for it. Is what I think is going to happen. Okay, Phil, give us your number one, and then I'll do number one. And
okay,
so
we're probably going to have an overlap, so I'm going to have to write 5 or 6 down because I know we're going to have some similar ones. But I'm going to start with Ethereum as a growth stock for 2024. Obviously we had the visit out there. I like the assets, certainly the Moroccan assets. The copper plays look really good. They've got like 17 or 18 assets there. We went to Rwanda. We saw the Comptoir, which is the trading arm there, which looks really good. It's only a matter of time before they get some offtakes in place and send them away, which will generate revenues to cover working capital, which is always a winner. And they've also got the lithium assets that we've seen, and we've met Rio Tinto over there. We met Sandy. We met Tim as well, and we know that they're excited about the HCK1 lithium assets. So for me, at the valuation of 9 million with a JV with Rio, copper in Morocco, and the trading arm, it's massively undervalued at 9 million.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, the first one I chose is a bigger market cap one, and that is Jubilee Metals. I think Jubilee Metals in South Africa and Zambia. We visited both of the places at the beginning of 2024. The uptick in copper that's going to come in Zambia, I don't think anybody's going to believe. Honestly, I believe it's going to be a monster. And what's actually going to happen, I believe, is this is going to become a recycling or reconstitutioning of copper that the majors have left stockpiles of stuff and all over the world. Now, at the minute, it's going to be in Zambia, but I think that's only the beginning. So I think this is going to be, and I predict within the next 3 years, Jubilee Metals will be a £1 billion company. At the minute, it's valued at about 144 million pounds. Okay, but I think this has got the potential to be a £1 billion company and then a multi-billion pound company. There's that much copper required, and if it does start producing the amount of copper that we expect, then if the copper price starts to rise because there is such a discrepancy in the amount of copper there and the amount of copper available, then the actual transaction of the copper going up is going to make this company so profitable. And on top of that, you've got the base of the fact that it's got the PGMs and the chrome. And again, this is already a very profitable business from that. And they've created a situation where they're going to do it now block by block by block. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's going to be very successful. It's no longer huge plants. It's going to be modular, block by block by block as required, and therefore will be easily able to transmit this around the world and start to clean up a lot of these sites. And a lot of these sites, I believe, the government and the companies are going to pay them to do it, as well as they generate the metal as well. Win-win. Number two, Phil?
I'm going to go for Tech Mins. I think they've been kicked down a lot. I think they've made some great advances. Well, you took my number 2, which was Jubilee. So I'm going to take your number 2. So Tech Mins, massively knocked back. They were trading around the 3.5 pence. So well under even the IPO price. 1 pence a stock at the moment. It probably values them around the 50. It's a 50 million cap at the moment as we speak. And I think they've got a lot of potential in 24, as they've just had the EA approval. The commissioning's done at their lithium-ion battery recycling centre in Wolverhampton. They've got the lead acid as well, which is being commissioned as we speak, the lead acid recycling plant. And I think that as you mentioned, you've already alluded to it, the gate fees alone will probably give them, something like 20 million of EBITDA. Certainly maybe the end of next year or even into early 25. So for me, that one. And then they're also going to have the RTO with Recycler. So there'll be a completely new, and not new entity, but they'll go under the ticker of Recyclers. I can't remember, is it RMG or something like this, but it's a Recyclers Group, RCG. So that they'll effectively be 100% listed, 100% owned. And yeah, it all looks like a really good year coming together for them. So for me, that's my second pick.
Yeah, and it's narrowing it down, because I certainly would have picked Tech Minerals. I would have picked Conroy Gold as well, Paul, and I think I would have picked GMET as well. So those ones are things that I would have picked. But as we're trying to make sure that we're not picking the same ones, the one I think I'm going to go for, which is a really small cap, but again, it's in the copper space. It's in Africa, it's in Zambia. The potential to have Kawezi-style copper. There is basically a huge discovery right next to it. It's African Pioneer. This, I believe, in the next 3 years. It also have assets in Namibia, a copper mine which eventually has a mining license and should be ready to go. Has a crazy small market capitalization of about £4 million, I think, maybe even less. And yeah, if you want something that, if this comes off, the Kawezi style mining, it has a joint venture with a major, I think it's First Quantum. If this comes off, then African Pioneer are going to be talking about banking in excess, in my view, of $100 million. Now, if you've got a market capitalization of £4 million and somebody then says, we'd like to buy this off you for $100 million, I think the share price is going to go up. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, it's a reasonable investment case.
So African Pioneer, and the beauty behind African Pioneer is if the Kawezi style mineralization isn't there, which would be a bit of a surprise, I think, based on the fact that literally within a kilometer it is there, then we're in a situation where the mine in Namibia should have somewhere in the region of 6,000 to 8,000 tons of copper a year in production. And again, within the next 1 to 2 to 3 years, that should be in production. And African Pioneer are obviously going to have their piece of that. So is it worth £4 million at that stage? Not a chance. I mean, basically, they're going to be producing several times that much in EBITDA just from the Namibia thing. So that would be my second choice. What's your final one, Phil?
Okay, my final one, and this is a bit of a not left field choice, but it's not in the mining sector, it's in the pharmaceutical space. And Charles and I will be visiting the facility probably in the coming months. It is the Celadon Pharmaceuticals. Basically, they are a cannabis-based medicines. They're medicinal cannabis sector. And there was a really nice piece on, I don't know if you saw it it was this week, I tweeted it. James Short, the CEO, was on Sky News. It was in conjunction, they were talking about this NHS trial that was being run in conjunction with Celadon. It was a fascinating piece. And basically, they announced at the middle of November that they had a new sales contract with a European medicinal cannabis company, which had the potential to generate revenue to Celadon of up to £26 million of product, which was about 8.7 million on an annual basis over the 3-year term. So first delivery anticipated in sort of second half of 2024. And the two parties retain the option to extend the contract for a further 2 years by mutual agreement. I'm under the impression, I get the feeling that there's going to be more of these to come. It's only a matter of time because there's so much demand, pent-up demand for medicinal cannabis in this sector. So for me, Celadon, market cap 54 million, not really that expensive when you look at some of the competitors out there, and certainly in the US. So for me, Celadon for sure, it looks great, poised to go in 24.
Yeah, and Celadon, really, the interesting part about Celadon is that it is a pharmaceutical play. Don't kid yourself that it's just cannabis and growing it and selling it. Celadon is going to be a pharmaceutical producer of different things. It has the only test or trial that is in the UK at the minute. And actually, if that happens for pain relief within the United Kingdom, they could not supply the United Kingdom with enough. It's not possible. So they're then going to have to outsource that, but still get paid based on the fact that it's their formulas that are used. So, yeah, fantastic choice. Okay, my last one, third one, and again, Celadon was on my list, would be Chill Brands. And the reason why I chose Chill Brands is simply because of the scalability of this business. You've got two parts of this business. You've got the non-nicotine vapes, both disposable and non-disposable are possible. Disposable is the way it's going at the minute. It has only started selling them in August of this year. They're up to 475 branches in the UK that it's being sold at, or retail outlets. They've signed a deal with WH Smith's, and there are more deals on the horizon, without doubt. On top of that, you've got a situation where you've got the ability to scale this massively. You've got the UK, you've got the US, we've got Europe. We're on Amazon in the UK in terms of selling the products. You've got the ability to go basically worldwide quite easily. It's a hell of a name, as in Chill Zero. They've got chill.com, and that is the second part of the business. They've got a Amazon-like marketplace, which they're now selling stuff in. I suppose it's the type of stuff you might find on Amazon, but you might not, if you know what I mean. So you're talking about alcohol alternatives, you're talking about mushroom things, you're talking about deodorants that are ethical deodorants, if you like. You're talking about CBD products, you're talking about vitamin type products. And the aim of the CEO, Callum Summerton, is to have more than 300 brands on that website and on the situation by the end of 2024. Now, that's an achievement, but he's gone from 0 to 45 quite quickly. And I think the scalability of this, and to be worth more than several £100 million. And then, in all honesty, for one of the big tobacco companies to come in and go, I like that brand, I'll have it, thank you very much. And £500 million plus pounds later, why not?
Why not?
I just want to interrupt because there's a catalyst there. British American Tobacco just wrote off £25 billion worth of its cigarettes business in the US because it's sunset clause, like it's done. So they need to get those new categories. And yes, they're doing their own investment. But when you look at a company like Chill, it's so much easier to just buy an operation that's already working. Yeah. I think, the opportunity is just what you're saying, what you were saying, Gavin, is it's already happening. The catalyst is already there. So you just need to wait for it, and then bam, it'll get sold out.
Okay, I'm going to flip this on its head completely now. A bit of a curveball. We have to now pick one investment we've heard of that's not in our list, starting with you, Kev.
Sorry, one that we've talked about here?
Yeah, that we're not allowed to talk our own book, as in you can pick one of Charles, you can pick one of Paul's, or one of mine to take forward into 2024, that potentially you haven't got.
Well, if I was to pick an investment now that I didn't suggest over the next 3 years, because that was my category, then, or my scenario, I think I would pick Power Metal Resources.
Okay.
I think the potential of the number of things that could go right is huge.
Okay, so Paul, what's your choice out of the ones you've heard from us?
Well, I've got to be honest, as a participant in the vape market, it's got to be Chill Brands. It's a mass market business. There's nothing stopping this apart from perhaps governments trying to work out how to tax it properly. And the upside, you just have to look at your local corner store to see everyone is peppered with these things. And if you've got a position in that market, as Charles said, you are such a takeover target. It's obvious.
Charles?
Celadon has to be Celadon. I mean, yeah. When I did like initial research into it a year ago or so, 90,000 prescriptions for unlicensed cannabis medications between November 2018 and July 2022 in England, but only 5 of them, of those 90,000, were issued by the NHS. The problem is NHS doctors just don't want to prescribe unlicensed treatments, but if you have a licensed treatment from Celadon, they'll capture an entire market, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of patients.
I'm going to go for I'm going to go for Sovereign Metals, mainly because those numbers are indelibly marked on the back of my eyelids, and I know the numbers, and I'm just fascinated by how that company has not moved up massively in its valuation. It's just
simple. This has not been marketed, so people don't know about it. And this isn't. When I said that there's a giant list made by Argonaut, I knew almost every deposit apart from that one. So they just need to put their name out there and it will fly.
There isn't a company that any of us mentioned that I'd be worried about over the next 3 years. That would be my view. That all of them, I think. I mean, and we're in the small cap market, but the interesting thing about the small cap market right now, anyway, is if you have survived the last 2 years and you have forced a way through and protected what you've got, and it's got a chance to grow. Boy, it's going to grow. I mean, I don't see how it's not. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, it's the darkest of the night is just before the dawn. Isn't that the common saying? And it seems impossible that you can see, decent growth in my space, junior resources. But at the bottom of the COVID dip in March, April 2020, power was 0.175 on one horrible day. And then it went up nearly 20 times in the space of 10 months. So I think we're going to see some explosive movements in these shares. Most people won't buy in because they'll continuously convince themselves they've missed the boat. And then eventually they'll get excited when things are multiples higher than they are today. Capital restrictions prevent people from getting too excited and putting too much cash in. But I think it's the opportunity possibly of a lifetime.
I'd agree with you. And I think one of the best things about it is that in the junior resource sector in particular, is that, you've seen it all before. That there's a commodity cycle, right? You don't know when it's going to happen, but that there's going to be low points. You also know it will be followed by high points. At the moment, we're at the market low. And the thing is, there will come a point where the greed of investors as things start to rise overtakes the fear and everything goes back up again. But I find it kind of fascinating how you have a lot of assets now that from a technical standpoint are developed significantly more than they were 1 or 2 years ago, power metals included, and yet the share price is lower. And all that tells you is that the share price is low because of a macroeconomic environment and not because of the business fundamentals. So yeah, give it, buy shares, right? Again, not investment advice, but buy shares in the junior resource sector in quality companies. Wait a few years and off you go. And then in these growth stocks like Celadon and Chill, these companies will scale. So yeah, opportunities galore in the AIM space and in the main market. It's great.
Right. So I've got a question just in a slightly different area. It's we need to be quick on this because we've talked for a long time already. But it's really energy. Where do you see the greatest places to put energy? I mean, my views are that I think the gas plays and probably the uranium plays are going to be where the energy peaks are, if you like. But what do you think, Charles?
Are you talking about commodity or by company or sorry?
Company, commodity, whichever. I mean, in terms of companies, I certainly like Prospects, excuse the pun, from a gas point of view.
Well, they're cash generative, aren't they? And share prices. Yeah. The sell-off has been crazy. If you want a higher risk company, I quite, and this is controversial, I quite like and have held shares in Barron Oil for a long time, simply because Shoreditch, which is their kind of flagship asset in East Timor, I'm certain it will get developed in time. I don't know when, but when that asset gets developed or most likely gets bought out, it'll be a multiple of the share price. In terms of oil and gas plays, I think the problem is, again, that, if you look at kind of the UK companies like IOG, didn't work out, Angus Energy, obviously horrible falls. Even Union Jack Oil, which I think has got a solid business model, but the share price has been falling recently. So you have this situation where people in the oil and gas space are kind of struggling to find reasons to invest. But again, it's exactly the same thing, which is that markets change. Things will improve over time. And you have a kind of crazy situation where you've Beacon Energy, another one with possibilities. But you have this crazy situation where oil and gas prices are high, but the junior resource sector is low. And in another space, if you look at the gold price, it's a record high, and yet junior resource sector gold stocks or gold assets are just not showing that valuation at all. So those valuation gaps are super interesting. What do you think?
Well, one of the things is starting to happen is IPOs are starting to happen, and we've said this on other podcasts. So we've got Pathway Energies, which is a gas play off the northwest coast of the UK, which is coming to market on the 14th, which is next week. Is it? What day is it next week? 14th? It's Thursday, is that something? So look at that one, because originally that was going to come to the market at 20 million market cap, and instead, because of the way the capital markets are, it's come to the market at 6 million. And nothing's changed. No assets are any different. So yeah, very interesting. Paul, what's your thoughts on energy and specifically the uranium? Because obviously you guys had uranium and Power Metal Resources. So tell us a little bit about that as a final shot.
Yeah, when we staking land in the Athabasca Basin region, was a fair amount of land available back in September 21. All the land pretty much has been staked up. We were able to get some of the best properties, and that's been proven by the exploration work that's been announced this year, with some major targets come from that. There's no boom like a uranium boom, in fairness. If you look back to 2006-7 with incredible returns, hundreds, thousands of times on certain stocks. And there's not that many opportunities in the UK to invest. You've obviously got Power. You've got soon to be, one would expect, UEE, the spin out from Power. You've got NEO recently came to market. And you've got, Thor, THR ticker with uranium interest. There's very few junior exploration companies in this space in London. So that actually is a problem, because you need, it's like a shopping centre that only has a couple of stores. You're not going to get too many visitors. There's going to be more listings of uranium companies. There's going to be traction in the UK, but supply demand will kick in, and you're going to see some quite remarkable returns from uranium exploration, I think, for UK investors.
Very good. Well, give us your last words, Charles, before we wrap it up, and then Paul, give us your last words, and we'll call it a day, because I think we've had a good chat.
My last words are simple. Interest rates have peaked. I think whether you're in the UK, the US, or Australia, it's unlikely that they're going to rise further. And if they do rise further, it won't be by very much. And what this means in the small cap space is that the valuations are at their bottom, or very nearly. If you look at the FTSE AIM market, it's been rising over recently. We had a bottom, I think, and now everything's going to go back up again. And the only question is, there's two questions. The first is, can you hold through the volatility? And the second is, when there are good opportunities that are undervalued, are you going to buy the shares now? Or how long are you going to wait? And are you going to be sitting on the sidelines in 2025 when we're back at the peak of the market? And you could have had the shares much, much cheaper, whether it's Power Metals or Golden Metal or Celadon. The opportunities there are just the valuation disconnects are crazy. And yeah, final word, I guess, get buying.
Paul?
Yeah, I think if you're an investor that's had to ride through this horrible last 2 or so years, 3 years in the junior resource space, and you're still in the game, then hats off to you. It's incredibly difficult. The confidence levels, sentiment levels are extremely low, and you've taken a battering, and you genuinely deserve, and I believe will receive dramatic returns from holding on. It's not an easy game. The reason why you make the big money in this space is because it's so damn hard from time to time to hold on through. So keep the confidence levels up, keep your spirits up, try and get away from the screens every now and again, and just give it a little bit more time, and I think you'll see exponential gains in this space.
Spot on. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more on those points. So I think we'll wrap things up now and just say, Paul Johnson and Charles Archer, first off, Merry Christmas, if it's not too early to say that. But and thanks very much for your time coming on and giving us your musings.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so this is the season finale of I think season 6 of the roast, and but we will be back on Christmas Eve with the 12 stocks of 23 roundup. Obviously, where we go through where we are at the end of the year could be quite interesting, I'm sure, Kev. And then also we've got on the 12 stocks for the 12 days of Christmas, which will go out from Christmas Day right through till January the 3rd with our picks for 2024.
Yeah, it should be interesting. We wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. And thanks for listening, guys. It's been a pleasure to talk some good common sense to you, to bring you some stuff from different places in the world, and to talk crap at times as well, which has been very good.
Therapeutic, isn't it, as well?
Therapeutic indeed. We've enjoyed it, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well. We don't want to be too serious, but at the same time, we're learning every day. Every day is a school day, and we are becoming more and more knowledgeable ourselves, and hopefully that's transmitting some more and more knowledge to you guys who are listening as well, guys and girls. And thanks for the support of listening, and we hope it's useful for you. And if it is, let us know, because that always helps. And as I say, we're being straight up. We're going to be showing you on the 24th of December what the picks did for the year, and then going ahead and selecting the 12 stocks for next year, and 5 gold rings, which is what we did last year as well. So we will cover those as well.
Do us all a favour by hitting the subscribe button and also the bell icon so you receive further notifications for any future episodes. And we'll look forward to updating you in the new year.
Thanks again.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.